Welcome to the Halloween special. This was Halloween a few years ago, and this event has completely changed my view on the holiday for good. My family was really into Halloween. We'd decorate the whole house and my parents would throw this annual party for all of their friends and family in the night. I was 17 years old when this happened, and I was just starting to grow out of the desire to go trick-or-treating. Instead of kitty costumes that I wanted to wear as a kid, this year I was going to be a sexy bee. The bee was actually a play on my name. My name's Brienne. I had it in my head that it might be fun to introduce myself as, "Hi, I'm Bree." Yeah, I know. I was 17. This year my parents told me that I can invite a couple of my own friends along to the party, and that we're allowed to drink. We weren't allowed to go overboard, but we were allowed to drink. If we did drink, it had to be consumed up in my room and away from the other guests. My parents were really awesome people. They understood that if you kept a teenager locked away, told them they can't do this and that, that's exactly what they would do. And it was much better for us to experience this under the supervision. Once we're allowed, we're less likely to abuse the privilege. So I decided to invite my best friend, my crush, and his friend. My best friend's name is Jenny. She arrived earlier that morning and we were making sure our costumes were all prepared. When it was time to start getting ready, we did each other's makeup and we were already sipping on some daiquiri cocktail that was stolen from downstairs. My mother makes these huge containers of it every year. It sits on a block of ice in a bucket in the middle of the room, and people can come and drink from it whenever they like. The drink wasn't in our fridge yet, so Jenny and I had snuck down earlier and poured a bunch into a container. The party was in full swing by the time Fred arrived. Fred was my crush. When I saw him, I thought maybe he had also chosen a joke on his own name, because the person that I let in through my door was in full Freddy Krueger costume. We first saw him walking up the street, and he was outside the house waving casually at us as we were hanging out the window. We ran down and let him in. Opening up the door, we only registered that it was him. "Where's Sam? Did Sam not arrive?" I asked. He only shrugged. I didn't think about this at the time. I was already rather intoxicated, didn't really notice that he was only using body movements to answer me. "I guess Sam isn't coming," I said, already being absorbed by the fact that Fred was in my house. He's at my party. He came. What a wonderful night this is going to be, I thought. We were excitedly drunk and talking about something or other when we started to walk back upstairs to my room. When Jenny and I got there, we turned around. Fred wasn't following us. We went into my room and we sat down and we started chatting again, thinking that maybe he just needed to go to the toilet. Or maybe he wanted to get a drink and he would join us shortly. But 10 minutes later, he never appeared. At this time, we decided to go downstairs and look for him. We found him. He was standing in the corner of the living room, like right in the corner. The furthermost point that you could possibly be in the house. He was just standing there, watching. I was about to walk over to him and ask what he was doing when there was a scream from the kitchen. I turned around to look and a bunch of people were making their way into the kitchen to see what was going on. Then someone else in the lounge room started to vomit where they stood. It was all red, like they were throwing up blood. I was in the process of turning back to Fred when he was climbing out the window. He started running off down the street, and all around me chaos was breaking out. More people were throwing up, and people were crying and screaming. Minutes later, ambulances were arriving and taking people away. After the police came and questioned us, I had explained about Fred's weird behavior, and they said that they would go talk to him. Apparently, someone put bleach in the daiquiris, and that's why they were vomiting up blood. Later, I heard that Fred never actually came to our party. He and Sam decided to skip it. They stayed all night at his house instead. We never found out who Freddy Krueger was, but he still haunts my nightmares 4 years later. I'm a 25-year-old man at the time of this story, and I was on my way from a Halloween party. I couldn't afford the registration at my car at the time, so I was taking the bus home. The party that I was at was rather boring. I didn't have very much to drink. I had a sensitive stomach. For some reason, I'd been turned off the drinks and everyone was so annoying. A friend of mine spilt all of his vodka all over me. As I was sitting, I had my earbuds in my ears, but no music was playing while I was on my journey home. This woman ended up getting on the bus at one of the stops and she sat across from me. As soon as she sat down, there was a smell radiating from her that made me want to puke. She smelled like a bin that had been left out all week in the sun with rotting meat in it. I couldn't help myself. I had to glance up and see what she looked like. I wanted to see if I could understand why she smelled so bad. But I think that was actually my first mistake. As I looked up, our eyes met. Her neutral expression twisted into a smile that was too wide. It was deviously large and her teeth were like broken piano keys. I was so shocked that I had to look away instantly. The woman then tried to talk to me, but no real words were coming out of her mouth, just strange sounds. Initially, I felt terrible. I thought that maybe she had some kind of disability and I was the rude one. However, that thought went away pretty quick. I pressed play on my music and blasted it. I thought maybe that if she could hear the sound coming through my headphones, that she would know that I wasn't paying attention anymore and leave me alone. I was wrong. I saw that she was still mouthing words in my direction, and though I couldn't hear her, I could see the words that she was making. I swear, she was telling me that she was going to kill me. At this moment, I decided to move seats. It was in my best interest to stay as safe as possible. This woman was crazy. My stop wasn't far away. Maybe it's better to be closer to the driver. So I packed up my stuff and went to the front. To my relief, she didn't move, but she did watch me the entire time. My stop came and I pressed the buzzer and I jumped off. I was standing just outside the bus as the doors closed, making sure I had everything. But then I smelt it. She was behind me. She had gotten off the bus as well. I started speed walking in the direction of my house. My house wasn't far. Only about 4-minute walk from the station. But to me, those 4 minutes were an eternity. It was pitch dark out and the road was wet. I don't remember when it rained, but it must have. I was considering this when I first heard her footfalls running up on me. I didn't bother to look behind me. I already knew what was happening. I broke into a sprint myself. I tried to get the hell out of there. I must have been running for at least a minute before I realized my lungs were burning. I had to stop to get my breath and I looked around. No one was around. I was relieved, but just as this feeling was consuming me, I was slammed into the ground from the other direction. That woman was on top of me and she was throwing punches and screaming at the top of her lungs. Moments later, I was free. I couldn't see straight. I could taste blood in my mouth. I guess the commotion was witnessed by a group of friends who were walking by, and they rescued me. When I got my wits back about me, I could see that 3 of them were holding her. Someone else was on the phone alerting the authorities, and another one was trying to help me up and make sure I was okay. It didn't take very long for the police to get her into cuffs either. The amazing part was that she was crying and speaking perfect English to the police, telling them that I was abusing her and she was only defending herself. However, the group that saved me, my 3 missing teeth, my black and blue face, the cuts, the scrapes, the blood, and the house's security camera across the road told a completely different story. They found a knife in her shoe, which I'm very glad that she would have had a hard time getting, because I reckon this could have added up to a very different scenario. There's only one good thing about this story. One of the friends who was making that call to the police that night, she's now my wife. This is the story of how I was kidnapped on Halloween. For context, when this happened, I was 12 years old. I had convinced my parents to let me go trick-or-treating with 2 of my best friends without supervision. We had a curfew. We had to be back inside by 7:30 p.m. and we weren't allowed to go any further than our local park, which was about a 10-minute walk away. My friends and I thought we were the coolest at the time. We were Greek god themed. I was Hercules. My muscles were drawn on with body paint. I thought I was the hottest thing since sliced bread. But looking back on it now, I was just a skinny, nerdy kid. We have visited a ton of houses, and our buckets were already at their carrying limit by 7 p.m. It's when we saw one more house. Its lighting inside was just a dull glow. We thought it was just the scariest thing. Turns out the reason why it was so scary because the house was actually abandoned. Not because it was intentionally scary. The dull glow was because the squatter was using candles for light because the house had no power connected to it. But I wasn't aware of that at the time. We walked up to the gate and about to go in, my friends conveniently decided that they didn't want to. That they had to get home immediately, or else they wouldn't be home by 7:30. I remember yelling at them that they were chickens as I saw them walking off. I also flipped them off, as young kids do, to your friends. And I was left to continue up the path to the house. I knocked on the door and I yelled, "Trick or treat!" The door creaked open and a messy-haired woman appeared. She told me that I looked very strong and that she'd just run out of candy, but she was making some hot chocolate if I wanted some. I knew about stranger danger, but for some reason it just didn't connect. The talk my parents had with me and this woman, I just didn't feel like I was in any danger. I went inside and the rooms were all empty, apart from a little gas cooker and a sleeping bag. There was also this giant backpack in the corner that you see backpackers use. I had some hot chocolate with her, made in a little pot. Then not too much longer, I remember thinking, oh no, and my eyes not wanting to open, and then I went blank. After that, I'm not sure how much time had passed, but when I woke, I was in a car and it was daytime, and she was singing to the radio. I remember waking up and screaming that I wasn't supposed to be here, that she needed to take me home. She told me that she couldn't do that and that I was expected. She kept laughing, telling me that Darren was expecting me and that we would be there in a few days, and if I was good, she would feed me. We were on the road for a couple of days. Whenever I needed to go to the toilet, she would be in the stall. Whenever we ate, we'd go through the drive-thru. I eventually learned that my kidnapper's name was Sparrow. Obviously, that was her chosen name, not her birth name. And that she was using me to pay off a large debt that she had accrued. Whenever I cried, she would hit me with a rolled-up map that she used and tell me that I was just being weak, and if I was going to survive, I needed to understand the rules of survival of the fittest, that she was the fittest. And then she would laugh. Being hit with a map never actually hurt, but it dug into my memory so hard. To this day, I get a strange feeling whenever I hear any sound that is similar. It was my lucky day when we got to the Canadian border. Because when it was our turn to be checked, I started screaming at the top of my lungs for help, that I had been kidnapped, that this lady, I didn't know her, and that she was taking me to be sold. Sparrow tried to wave them off. I was just her naughty kid. But the officers didn't believe her, and they didn't take it lightly. Very quickly, they had gotten her out of the car and she was on the ground being cuffed. It was only 8 hours later when I was back in the arms of my mother and father. In total, I was missing for 5 days. But I don't remember all of that. The police think I was actually kept drugged for most of it. Sparrow is now in prison, and that house that I walked into that night has been demolished. Two years ago was the last time I participated in Halloween. I made a very big mistake that year, and I still think about it every single Halloween. There was this girl I liked. Her name was Samantha. She was actually my neighbor, and I could see her silhouette through her curtains in her room from my own room. I used to have this daydream that we would somehow develop that kind of relationship that you see in movies, where the boy and the girl would sit there, sitting out their window, looking up at the stars, talking for hours. I wanted that to be us. Yeah, I was in love with Samantha. One of our issues is that we were no more than acquaintances. We knew each other, but we didn't hang out or anything. So the Halloween in question, I had this brilliant idea. I was just gonna spook her a little bit. And then, reveal that it's me, haha, and everything's okay and we could start finally being friends. But it got a little bit out of hand. It was around 8 p.m. and all the kids had started clearing off the streets and heading home. Within the spirit of things, I was dressed up as Scream. Full body costume, all in black, the white mask, the plastic dagger. I started throwing pebbles at her bedroom window. Just wanted to give her a little fun, spoopy night. I didn't know it would turn out the way it did. I knew she was in her room. I could see her. She kept poking her head out, and I made sure to hide every time. Eventually, she ended up turning off her light and going downstairs. I went outside of her house. Just between mine and hers, I could hear the TV was on. So I went to her lounge room window and I started to tap on the glass. I could see a little bit through the curtains. I saw her stop, turn, mute the TV, and she was listening. I took the opportunity to tap again. I think this is when she started to get really afraid. I don't know why I was still going. I think about this all the time. Why did I continue past this point? She came over to the window and she flung open the curtains. There I was, bathed in the light of her house, fully costumed, standing there in front of her window. She screamed. At the top of her lungs, she screamed, and she started to run. She didn't even think to reclose the curtains, and I had full view of her running back upstairs. I went around the back. To my surprise, her back door was unlocked, and I creeped in. I'm not sure what my plan was. I don't think I even had one. I should have just done something like jumped out and ripped off my mask and said something funny like ooga booga. But that's not what I did. Instead, I creeped into her house up the stairs after her. I remember thinking that she must be home alone. There's no one else here. There's no movement after her scream. I can't hear any talking. After I got up the stairs and into the hallway, it was easy to see what room was hers, the one with the light shining under the door. I went up to it. The floorboard under my foot creaked from my weight. I remember looking down at the floor and internally smiling, thinking that was just perfect to freak her out. I reached for the handle and jiggled it. It was locked. She started yelling from the other side that it's locked and if I try and get in, she's going to stab me. This is when I came to my senses. What the fuck was I doing? My prank had gone so far, and this poor girl, this girl that I was in love with, was now locked into her bedroom, petrified. She had a knife. In this moment, I realized that there was a very real possibility that I was in danger of being stabbed. I ran down the stairs and I jumped over my fence and threw off my costume as fast as I could. I stayed in my room all night. I didn't turn my light on. I didn't watch TV. I didn't go on my laptop. I didn't do anything. Instead, I watched her silhouette pacing in her room, back and forth all night long. During this time, it truly sunk in what I had done. One day, I actually confessed this to my friend, and he just laughed and said, "Oh man, don't worry, no one was hurt." That's not really true, is it? Hi everyone. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for still being here. Please do remember to subscribe, like and comment, because it really does wonders for the channel. And if you can't get enough spoopy entertainment, drop by my Twitch channel. On every Thursday or Friday, depending on where you are in the world, we're doing spooky horror streams. Thank you so much everyone, and have a safe Halloween.